Chapter 259, 876, 5. Inside of a large empty white room. Crash. A loud crashing sound reverberated across the room. The source of the sound was a large metallic humanoid robot. Opposite to the robot was a youth. The youth was fairly muscular and had thin short black hair that spiked upwards. Hair aside, the most striking feature of the youth were the terrifying scars that covered half of his face. Tracing from the top of his head to the bottom of his head, the youth looked absolutely terrifying. This, coupled with his indifferent eyes, would have made anyone look at him in fear. He looked terrifying. Coldly looking at the robot, the youth took a step back. Why? Instantly two robotic arms appeared in the position he was previously standing. Once the two arms appeared, lifting his foot slightly, 876 twisted his torso 45 degrees and kicked one of the robots right in the head. Bam! A dully metallic sound rang out. Thud. Following this, one of the robots fell to the ground. Without wasting a single second, 876 thrust his sword downwards. Beep. Once the sword made contact with the robot, a beeping sound came out of the robot. Ignoring it, 876 jumped on the robot and tensed his legs. Why? Upon making contact with the robot on the ground, 876 released the tension between his legs and jumped backward. The moment he jumped, a terrifying fist flew towards the area he was standing, barely missing him by an inch. Thud. Softly landing on the arm of the robot, channeling his mana, and using his right leg, 876 kicked the last robot in the head. Bam! Another dull sound rang out as a shockwave swept the area. Thud. Falling alongside the robot, 876 softly landed on the ground. He was completely unharmed. Beep. Repeating the same thing he did with the other robot, stabbing downwards, a beeping sound rang out. Having eliminated the last robot, sheathing his sword back, 876 calmly looked upwards. Towards a tinted glass window by the side of the room. Beep. All right, good job 876, your test ends now. You're dismissed for now. Joseph's voice rang out from the speakers around the room. Without saying anything and nodding his head, 876 made his way towards the entrance of the room. Arriving before a thick metal door, 876's footsteps halted. Kshee! Slowly the doors opened and 876 left the room. Inside of a different room. Looking through a series of recordings regarding 876, Joseph laughed out loud. Excellent. 876 has grown much more than I had anticipated. 3 months had passed since 876 had arrived. During that period of time, alongside 2 more test subjects, 091 and 654, Joseph had finally managed to develop his first prototypes of the soldiers he wanted to create. An emotionless machine that would disregard anything for their goal. Out of the 3, 876 was by far the most successful subject. Not only was he capable of remaining under the emotionless state for the longest out of the 2, but he had also shown the most growth in combat. Compared to 091 and 654, 876 was by far a more completed super soldier. It's a pity though. Recalling 876's face, Joseph shook his head. With scars covering a better part of his face, he looked absolutely hideous. Fortunately, looks didn't matter, so Joseph didn't really care about his scars. Trying. Disrupting Joseph out of his thoughts was his phone. Looking at the caller ID, Joseph's brows knit. Xavier. He muttered underneath his breath. The one person he disliked the most. What do you want? He answered. Joseph. How are you doing? Cut the crap, get to the point. Knowing full well that Xavier also didn't like him, Joseph went straight to the point. Very well then, I would like to tell you that the 3 months are up. It's time to show us what you've achieved. Now? Yes. By tomorrow. Joseph remained silent for a moment. Although he had expected such a day to come, now that it was quite close, he couldn't help but become nervous. What if they don't act as I intended them to? What if they fail? Many questions crossed through Joseph's mind as he bit his nails and walked around the room with his phone in his hand. This was a bad habit of his that showed up whenever his emotions were out of control. Did you hear me? Yes, I heard you. Snapping him out of his thoughts was Xavier's calm voice. Okay, then. I will come tomorrow on behalf of the higher-ups to see what you've accomplished. You better not disappoint me. Wait, you're the one coming? Is there a problem? No, I just thought that we'd have to go to them. Right, you must have not heard yet since you're always stuck inside of your lab. Heard what? Joseph tilted his head in confusion. Is there some sort of event that's happening that I'm not aware of? Because he holed himself up in the lab most of the time, Joseph was unaware of what was happening in the outside world, or more like he usually didn't care. Therefore it wasn't strange for him to not know the situation outside of his lab. We're currently at war. The higher-ups are busy. War. What happened? Joseph's mouth dropped as he screamed out loud. Just what AR? Know your place. Before he could finish speaking, Xavier's grave voice cut him off. Realizing his mistake, Joseph instantly apologized. I apologize. I was just shocked. He was but a mere researcher. It was impudent of him to ask for such sensitive information. That is understandable, however, you better watch your tongue. All I can tell you is that it has something to do with the Union. But that's all. The Union? Yes, anyhow, we've derailed from the original purpose of this conversation. I'll be seeing you tomorrow. You better show me something worth my time. Understood. Joseph seriously nodded his head. Good. I'll see you tomorrow then. Tack. Xavier quickly hung up the call. Hoo. Putting his phone away, Joseph took a deep breath. Turning around and looking at the 3 profiles on his table, he closed his eyes slightly. It's time for you 3 to finally make your debut. Moments after leaving the training facility, putting on a couple of bracelets that suppressed my rank, the effects of Monarch's indifference instantly wore off. After suppressing my rank, accompanied by the same guard as before, I was brought back to my room. Fortunately, because of my elevated status, he couldn't abuse me as he did in the past. Thus after bringing me in and cursing at me, he directly left the room. Clank! Once the guard closed the door, silence enveloped the room. Blankly staring at the ceiling for a good minute, I closed my eyes slightly and muttered. 3 corridors to the right, 2 to the left, and from there keep going straight till you find a large metallic door with a red lamp by the side. Those were the coordinates of the surveillance and communications room of the lab facility. Passing them each day to get to the training room, I made myself repeat the steps to get there every time I came back from training. I couldn't allow myself to forget this piece of information. If I wanted to escape, that was the first place I needed to destroy. Only when that was destroyed would I have a shot at escaping this place. PHSSSSS. Calmly walking towards the bathtub, I twisted the valve upwards. Water instantly ran down the tub. Walking towards my desk and taking out a small box, I opened it. Inside of it was a small glass bottle filled with green liquid. Tuesday. Walking back to the bathtub, I poured the contents of the bottle into the tub. As I poured the liquid, the water inside of the tub slowly turned murky green. A faint smell of sulfur enveloped the room, prompting me to frown slightly. The substance I was currently mixing in the bath was something Joseph had given to me. It was made from all sorts of rare medical ingredients, and it only served one purpose, and that purpose was to tamper my body. Since Joseph wanted to train super soldiers, to those that were actually successful, he provided adequate resources to aid their growth. This substance being one of them. It helped reinforce the bones and muscles of the body. TSSSSSS. Once the liquid was fully mixed, I took out my clothes. Taking one step into the tub, I slowly lowered my body. Upon making contact with my skin, vapor rose in the air. Hoo. Exhaling, I closed my eyes and grit my teeth. A stinging sensation enveloped my body. Like millions of needles were puncturing my body was put under an unimaginable amount of pain. Since Joseph thought that we could now not feel pain, he opted for the most painful method of growth. One that could cause any normal person to go insane. KHHH. A light groan escaped from my mouth. Biting my lip till they bled, I remained seated in the bathtub. At the 10-minute mark, my whole body turned red as my fists shook uncontrollably. 20 more minutes. Enduring the pain, I grit my teeth and tried my best to remain inside the bathtub for another 20 minutes. According to the professor, I had to endure the pain for 30 minutes for optimal results. Therefore, clenching my fists tightly, I tried to endure the pain. For the past few months, using the same method as what I was using just now, I was able to boost my strength considerably. I had already gone up by a sub-rank since coming here. I was now ranked. Using this method, rank wouldn't be an impossibility to reach within the next half a year. Splash. Eventually, 30 minutes flew by and unable to handle the pain anymore, I shot up and left the bathtub.
Ha! Ha!
With heavy breaths, I supported my body with my knees. Catching my breath for a minute, I weakly walked towards my bed and put on some clothes. Laying down on my bed, I muttered. Almost. Within the next few months, I was ready to finally get out of this place. By now, 3 months had passed and I was already almost fully healed. During these 3 months I didn't stay idle. Every day I would contemplate to myself on how to escape this place. Slowly but surely, a plan formulated itself inside of my mind. Though it was currently still filled with holes, given time, I could cover those. I just needed time. At least a couple more months. By then I would be able to have set up enough to properly escape this place. Till then, I need to lay low and continue planning. As long as I was still deemed useful to Joseph, I should be able to find ways to fill those holes. But I knew that I didn't have much time. I was now almost out of potions. Chapter 260, 876, 6. So, is this what you wanted to show me? Xavier's eyes squinted slightly. His sharp eyes glossed over 3 individuals as he looked at them from top to bottom. Halting his steps, he raised his brow and pointed towards one specific individual. One whose face was riddled with scars. He is? That's 876. Joseph replied. 876? Frowning slightly, Xavier licked his teeth underneath his lips. Just where have I heard of H? Smacking the palm of his hand with his fist, Xavier finally remembered. He's the one that came into our headquarters on fire? Looking at Joseph, he asked. That's him? What happened to his face? I thought that the extent of his injuries only amounted to burns. Where did the scars come from? That, I'm not too sure myself. I've never asked. Joseph replied with a bit of embarrassment. He was too busy developing his serum and testing it on the other subjects that he didn't even bother questioning 876 about his past. In all honesty, he didn't particularly care about his past. He only cared about his research. I see, so how is he? Puffing up his chest, Joseph pridefully said. Well, as a matter of fact, he is my most successful subject. There were also two other successful subjects, 091 and 654, but compared to 876, they were still lacking. Even then, Joseph introduced them to Xavier. These here are 091 and 654. Although they may be a little lacking compared to 876, they are still very capable. Alternating his eyes between 091 and 654, Xavier's eyes finally landed on 876. His eyes flashed with interest. Oh. So you're saying that out of the thousands of subjects you had, he's the most successful subject? Indeed. Okay. Xavier nodded his head. Shap. Dropping his jacket on the ground and unbuttoning the buttons of his sleeves, he calmly walked towards the middle of the training ground. Stretching his neck, he looked at Joseph and said, All right, show me. Huh? What, did you not hear me? I said show me. Show you what? Joseph was starting to get flustered. Turning his head and looking in the direction of where Xavier was looking at, he became even more flustered. Wait, are you trying to fight him? 876 was his treasure. His most successfully subject. There was no way in hell he would ever let him go near Xavier. Ignoring Joseph, Xavier continued. Don't worry, I'll suppress my strength to his level. D rank was it? I'll fight him at that level. Boo. It's not a request. It's an order. Cutting Joseph off, a cold glint flashed Xavier's eyes. A chill ran down Joseph's spine. Joseph, I'm here on behalf of the higher-ups. All you did was show me 3 individuals. That is not nearly enough to convince me that you're worth investing in. I'm not here to play games. I'm here to see what you've actually done. If I'm not satisfied by the end of this, you can say
Goodbye
to your project. Think carefully.
Ah.
A defeated sound escaped from Joseph's lips. Despite his status, he was but a mere researcher. He couldn't really go against the higher-ups' order. Especially since he couldn't fight back either. His only option was to give in. Weakly staring at Xavier, he nodded his head. Understood. But please don't kill him. Pleased, Xavier laughed out loud and reassured. Who do you think I am? There's no need to worry, I'll hold back a lot. That would be great. A forced smile appeared on Joseph's lips. It's precisely because I know who you are that I'm saying this, he cursed inside of his mind. Xavier was notorious for his sadistic mindset. If his switch was flipped, only God himself would be able to stop him from going on a sadistic rampage. Thus, no weapons. Joseph said after mustering all of his courage. As long as Xavier did not use a weapon, 876 may have a chance at surviving. What? Stopping himself mid-stretch, Xavier looked at Joseph. What did you just say? Clenching his fists, Joseph repeated. I said no weapons allowed in this spar. After a brief moment of silence, staring at Joseph, an amused smile appeared on Xavier's lips.
Ah.
I see, so you're afraid I won't keep my promise. Xavier was not mad by Joseph's statement. In fact, he found it quite amusing. Raising his hand, he nodded his head. All right, I promise, in fact, I'll do you one better. If he can land a single hit on me, I'll grant you your funds. How about it? Surprised by the fact that Xavier had agreed to his request, Joseph was elated. You're being serious? I am. All right. Nodding his head, Joseph looked at 876 and ordered. Go and fight him. Understood. 876 responded in a monotonous tone. Almost robotic. Under everyone's eyes, he moved towards the center of the training ground. Standing 5 meters apart from Xavier, 876 indifferently looked at Xavier. A tremendous pressure oozed out of Xavier, who stood opposite to him. Yet, despite being under such pressure, 876 remained completely unfazed. Ho ho, this looks interesting. Joseph laughed out loud. Staring at the youth opposite to him was remaining unfazed by his pressure, his interest piqued. Turning his head, he looked at Joseph. Joseph, you may initiate the spar. Understood. Nodding his head, Joseph nervously looked at 876. Please don't die. If he died, all of his plans would go down the drain. Although 091 and 654 were both capable, they needed a lot more time to develop, unlike 876, who was by far the closest to achieving the state that he wanted. Alas. Under Xavier's threatening pressure, Joseph could only raise his hand in the air. Ready, get set, go. Bam! The moment Joseph's hand fell, 876 moved. Xavier remained rooted on the same spot. With a slight smile on his face, his eyes followed 876's movements. Let me see what you can do. The moment his words fell, 876 arrived before him. Planting his right foot on the ground, he twisted his torso slightly and kicked upwards, aiming for Xavier's head. Oh. Not bad. Moving his head slightly, a kick flew past him. The force of the kick was so strong that Joseph, who was standing quite far from them, could hear the booming sound of the air splitting. However, despite the prowess of the kick, Xavier was still able to dodge it easily. Swoosh! Swoosh! Unfazed by the fact that his first attack had failed, 876 continued to attack. Elbows, knees, palms, fingers, every single part of the body, 876 used. For the past few months, he had been trained every day to fight hand-to-hand combat. He had not been given a weapon yet because of his injuries. It could be said that because of that, he was now quite adept in hand-to-hand combat. Unfortunately. Swoosh! Wham, boring. Avoiding another fist, Xavier yawned. He was dealing with someone that was much stronger than him. Even if his rank was suppressed, his fighting experience was leagues above his. Turning his head, he looked at Joseph, who was standing not far from where he was. Is this really what you've been working for the past few months? Honestly, I'm pretty disappointed. Although he was impressed by the fact that 876 was unfazed by his pressure, that was it. Any regular guard could have performed as well as 876. There was nothing really special about him. At least nothing worth investing that much money in. All right, let's get this over with. After a while, Xavier grew tired. The faster this ended, the more time he had for himself. Raising his hand, Xavier threw a simple punch. Though it was simple, in actuality it was anything but simple. If one looked closely, a thin layer of mana was covering the fist. If the fist landed, without a doubt 876 would get seriously hurt. Swoosh! The moment Xavier punched, a cold glint flashed 876's eyes. Turning his body ever so slightly, he tensed his abdominal muscles, similarly punched out. A whistling sound arose and the air split apart. Hoo! Paw! Crack. Before Xavier could make out what had happened, 870 SIX's fist connected with his face. The sound of 870 SIX's fist connecting with Xavier's face resounded across the room, alongside it was the sound of bones breaking. Following this, heavy silence descended the room.
Ha!
Not bad. Not bad. Massaging his cheek slightly, Xavier's face twisted savagely. Not bad at all. Staring at 876, Xavier's eyes paused towards his right hand. No wonder. With his right hand loosely hanging, 876 was no longer in a state where he could fight. His left hand at the moment was completely shattered. Even then, the goal of the fight was to hit him, therefore, he had technically won. So he purposely injured himself for the sake of hitting me. This indeed seems a little intriguing. A soldier that had no regard for their life. Xavier had originally thought that such a thing wasn't possible, but staring at 876 before him, he had to admit, he was wrong. Still. Bam! Appearing before 876, Xavier's fist dug into his stomach. A small shockwave swept the surroundings. Oh hoo! The moment Xavier's fist hit landed, a small groan escaped from 870 SIX's mouth. Though his face didn't change, because of how strong the punch was, the air was knocked out of him as he fell on his knees. Thud. Hey, what are you doing? By the side, Joseph flusteredly shouted. Shut up. Snapping his head in Joseph's direction, a tremendous pressure bore down on him, paralyzing him completely. There was another reason for me coming here. Joseph steeply looked at 876. And that reason is him. Subject 876, it's about time we found out who he truly is. Crack. Putting his hand on 870 SIX's shoulder, the sound of bones breaking echoed across the training ground. To Xavier's surprise, as he broke 870 SIX's shoulder bones, he made no sound. He acted as though nothing had happened. This. Xavier murmured. The more I see it for myself, the more I'm amazed. Crack. Putting his hand on his other shoulder, he broke the other one. Yet again, 876 showed no reaction. Turning around, he looked at Joseph. Say, has he been brainwashed yet? Why, yes. I see. From what Xavier heard, Joseph's research consisted in erasing someone's emotions. If so, with him no longer having any emotions, answering questions would no longer be a problem since they shouldn't really care about anything else. Why keep a secret when you no longer feel the need to keep it? Turning his attention back to 876, Xavier asked. What's your name? After a short moment of silence, 876 replied. My name is 876. Xavier smacked his head lightly. Sorry, let me rephrase. What was your previous name? This time, 876 did not respond. Xavier's brows knit as a result. Cat got your tongue? I'll ask again, who were you before coming here? Once again, 876 did not respond. Turning around, Xavier looked at Joseph. Are you sure this works? No longer under Xavier's pressure, Joseph nodded his head. Yes. It should work. Then why isn't he speaking? Placing his hand on his chin, Joseph thought for a moment before responding. There's a possibility that he might have lost a part of his memories. Lost a part of his memories? Yes. Joseph once again nodded, as he explained. Don't you remember the state that he was in when you brought him to me? There's a high chance that he may have lost a part of his memories due to the trauma he experienced prior to coming here. Xavier made a small sound. Right. That does sound plausible. Recalling the state 876 was in when he first saw him, Xavier had a look of understanding. Turning his attention back to 876, Xavier asked multiple different questions. Do you remember anything about who you were before? Your parents' name? Your job? Your age, or where you got this ring from? From the first exchange, Xavier did not have much hope. He was only asking as a formality. He didn't really particularly care about 876's previous identity, but what he wanted to know was where he had gotten the ring from. There weren't many rings in circulation, and each ring was extremely precious as it would directly teleport someone into the headquarters of the monolith. He needed to know how he had gotten the ring. This wasn't something to merely laugh about. If 876 did not say anything useful, he'd have someone extract whatever memory he had. He didn't really care about the fact that it might result in Joseph's research slowing down. If he gave him enough money, it would more than make up for the loss. And just like he had originally assumed, 876 did not respond. He just blankly stared back at him. Lowering his head, Xavier sighed. All right, I guess there's no point in continuing this conversation. I'll get someone to extract his memories and see for M. Thibault. Just as Xavier was about to leave, 876 spoke. The ring, the man who I got the ring from is called Thibault. Did you just say, Thibault? Yes. Do you remember anything else regarding the ring? Xavier carefully asked. Negative. I see. Xavier's pinched the middle of his brows as the gears of his mind turned. Thibault, where have I heard of that name? The name sounded familiar. He had heard of it before. It was just at the tip of his tongue, but he couldn't quite place his finger on it. Just where? I remember now. Punching the palm of his hand, Xavier was finally able to recall where had heard of that name before. Alphonse Thibault. The agent that the monolith had spent countless resources in nurturing, who regrettably ended up being a total flop. Had it not been for his failure half a year ago, the monolith wouldn't have been in their current situation. Finally, after more than half a year of searching, he had finally heard news about him. Turning his attention back to 876, Xavier's tone became grave. Thibault, is he dead? Affirmative. Do you know who killed him? Affirmative. The moment he heard this confirmation, Xavier couldn't hide his anticipation. Because of how much Thibault's failure had cost the monolith, if he managed to find something about him, he may be able to get quite a reward from the higher-ups. Furthermore, each time 876 answered, he answered monotonously, with no changes in tone or facial expression. This alone made Xavier think that he was not lying. Who was it? Who killed Thibault? After a brief moment of silence, 876 answered. It was me. Xavier's brows jumped up at his response. You? Elaborate. Affirmative. 876 paused for a moment. According to my memories, said person attacked me. In self-defense, I killed him and stole all of his items. In the process of taking his item, his watch blew up and I got injured as a result. The moment Xavier heard about Thibault's watch blowing up, he knew that this was most likely not a lie. Upon the host's death, the monolith watch would automatically destroy itself. This was a preemptive measure that the monolith used to stop the Union from getting access to their database. Not many people knew this fact, giving more credibility to the story. However, just because he said that, there were still many things that didn't add up. Like, if you've killed him, how did you figure out how the ring works? From a small diary inside of his storage space. Diary? Affirmative. Inside of it was a long list of names.
Ah.
I see. Xavier nodded his head as he fell into deep thought. Within moments he started to get the gist of the situation. After his failure in completing his designated mission, knowing that we would not let it go, he must have decided to run away. With us in his pursuit, in order to lay low, there's a high chance that he resorted to robbing people in the street to make ends meet. From there he must have attacked 876 but ended up failing. In Xavier's mind, everything was starting to check out. After killing Thibaut, whoever 876 was before, he must have looked through his storage device and took everything. This was not something shocking as it was pretty much something everyone did once they killed someone. Also, the diary he was referring to must have been a list of possible recruits from the lock. Every agent had one. It was so that they could keep track of the people that they wanted to exploit and entice them to join the Union. The more Xavier thought about it, the more everything started to make more sense. Closing his eyes slightly, Xavier looked at Joseph. All right, I pretty much get the gist of the situation, Joseph. Take good care of 876. Once the higher-ups come back, I'll relay everything that he had told me to them and from there I'll let you know what we'll do with him. As he pretty much understood everything, he decided to tell the higher-ups first before deciding on whether to extract his memory or not. At least for now, he didn't think there was a need to. Sighing in relief, Joseph asked. Then what about my funds? Oh. Those? Pausing, Xavier looked at 876 before smiling. I'll put in a good word. He was satisfied with what he had seen. No, it would be better to say that he was extremely satisfied with 876's performance. A super soldier that disregarded anything for victory. Now, this was something the monolith didn't mind having. Though he got punched in the face in order to confirm this, Xavier's anger had already ceased. Especially after hearing news about Tia Butt. Picking up his jacket from the ground, Xavier made his way towards the exit of the training grounds. All right, I'll see you around, Joseph, and 876. Without looking back, he opened the door and left. Clank. Chapter 261, Escape 1. Days passed, and eventually, 5 more months flew by. It had now been about 7 months since I had entered this place, and a lot of things changed. Especially since my fight with Xavier, which took place around half a year ago. Ever since then, the number of successful subjects increased from 3 to 15, and the conditions I had been living in had improved drastically. Once again, my room changed. This time, it was a lot more practical as although it lacked any luxury, it had a private training facility. As a result of the improved conditions, my strength saw a significant boost. Training every day, and being fed all sorts of weird stuff, my strength surged at a faster rate than ever before. Even more than when I was at the lock learning from Monica and Donna. Within half a year, I had reached almost rank. Something that I would have never thought possible when first arriving here. In around 7 months, I shot up to almost rank. This was a speed that perhaps only Kevin could rival. Other than that. Full body martial arts. Hand-to-hand combat technique dedicated to utilizing every single part of the body to incapacitate the enemy. It may be a 3-star art, but upon mastery, it can be used to complement other forms of martial art. This was the technique that I had been learning for the past 2 months. A generic 3-star technique that every subject was forced to learn. And because I was learning this, my swordsmanship saw no significant boost during the past 7 months. I wasn't saddened by this as I had now tackled one of my biggest weaknesses. Fighting without a sword. But not everything was good. Splash. Walking towards the sink and washing my face, I turned my head slightly. Brushing my hair up, I looked at a small scar on the back of my head. KHH, it still hurts. Touching the scar, my face twitched in pain. About a month ago I underwent a surgical procedure at the hands of Joseph. A chip was installed into my brain. The chip was something that Joseph had created, and what it did was essentially increase the computational abilities of the user. In short, it made someone think at a much faster rate than before. A basic necessity for the super soldiers he wanted to create. That was good and all, but unfortunately, there was also a tracking device installed in it. Unaware of such a device existing in the novel, I was unable to prevent this, and thus, stuck with the chip inside of my head, I had to delay my escape plan for another couple of months. To make matters worse, 2 months ago, apart from one that I had been saving for a while, I had run out of healing potions. The only reason I was able to remain sane till now was that the number of dosages I took also saw a dramatic decrease compared to before. But this was a given. After all, the dosages did damage the nervous system. Too many, and they would only give the opposite effect of what they wanted. Instead of a super soldier, they'd get an idiot. Clank. 876, it's time to go. Barging into the room and disrupting me out of my thoughts, was the same guard that had been attending me for the past 7 months. Throwing me a look of disdain, he stepped to the side and gestured with his hand. Hurry up, don't waste the professor's time. Turning around, I indifferently looked at him. No words escaped from my mouth. Since I was supposed to be emotionless, I had to act the part. Therefore, without speaking a word, I complied with everything the guard was saying. Despite all of the abuse he was throwing at me, I endured and pretended to not feel anything. Well, that no longer applies as of today. Secretly clenching my fists, I closed my eyes. The gears of my mind slowly turned. Come on, I don't have all day. The guard impatiently grumbled. Once again not responding, I moved towards the entrance of the room. TSK, what an idiot. Ignoring the guard, just as I was about to leave the room, my footsteps halted. Turning around, I looked back at my room. Looking back at the room, I closed my eyes slightly. This is it, I thought. The moment I step out of this room is the moment where my fate is decided. 7 months. That was how long I had been waiting for this day. The day that I would finally escape from this hellish place. After months of planning, the time was finally ripe. With the conflicts between the Union continuously escalating each day, it was now the optimal time for me to escape. Especially since most of the higher-ups were out holding back the Union. What are you doing? The guard's confused voice reached my ears. Silently turning around, I took a step out of the room and closed my eyes. Asterisk. Following a route that I had been all too familiar with, the guard, Mark, stopped in front of the corridor that led to the training ground. Tapping onto his finger, a key appeared in his hand. Extend both of your hands. Without saying anything, I raised both of my hands. On them were 2 thick black bracelets. Click. Click. Inserting a small key into my bracelets and unlocking them, I could instantly feel my mana replenish as my rank rose all the way to. There, I've removed your restraints. Putting the key away, Mark patted his hands and put the bracelets away. Inching closer to my face, he smirked. To think that your rank. That's stronger than me. Turning around and looking at the corridor to make sure that there were no cameras present, Mark raised his hand. Paw. A loud smacking sound echoed across the corridor. The right side of my cheek started stinging. So what if you're stronger than me? In the end, you can't hit me. Unpleased by my reaction, or lack of reaction, Mark waved his hand and shooed me. Go, it's time for your training to start. To his surprise, however, I did not move. You've got something to say? After a brief moment, opening my mouth, I said. As a matter of fact, I do. What? Coo. The moment those words escaped from my mouth, Mark froze on the spot. Raising my face and extending my hand, to Mark's horror, he watched as my hand arrived before his throat. It was so fast that he had no time to react. KHH. Feeling the rough texture of his throat, I grabbed his throat. A groan escaped from Mark's lips. Yet. No matter how much Mark struggled, he couldn't free himself from his grasp. 876, WKHMMat, are you doing? Let go. You betraying the monolith? Coldly looking at Mark, a small smirk appeared on my lips. Instantly, a look of fear appeared on Mark's face. Betraying, a small chuckle escaped from my lips. I've never been part of the monolith. What betray? To begin with, for someone to betray something, they had to be a part of it. Not once did I recall ever agreeing to join the monolith. What? Somehow my words had a great impact on Mark as his face visibly paled. He was slowly starting to understand the situation. Why you? You were never brainwashed, to begin with. So you're not stupid. The smirk on my face disappeared. You know. Staring at Joseph, and recalling how he had tormented me for the past months, my grip on his throat tightened. If I wasn't so pressed for time, I would have taken my sweet time with you. I mean, surely you wouldn't forget about all of the horrible things you did to me these past few months, no? For 7 months I had held back my impulse to kill this piece of scum before him. Now that I was presented with the chance to get rid of him, a part of me really wanted to torture him. Torture him and make him go through the hell I had been through these past few months. But unfortunately, I didn't have enough time. TTH. Like I've said before, I, unfortunately, don't have time to chat with you any longer. Clenching my teeth and once again increasing the strength of my grip on his throat, I hoarsely said. The only reason I'm even speaking to you is so that you know who killed you. Cracka. The moment I finished those words, without giving Mark any chance to speak, clenching my hand, the sound of bones breaking echoed across the room. Even if I couldn't torture him, I wanted him to realize who he had messed with. Thud. Throwing Mark's slowly dying body on the ground, I closed my eyes slightly. That's the first step of the plan done. Next. Putting my hands inside of my underwear and taking out a small black bracelet, I channeled my mana and a wooden mask appeared in my hand. Staring at Mark who was slowly dying on the floor, I lowered myself. Stay still. Grabbing him by the cheeks, I slowly put the mask on his face. The moment the mask touched Mark's face, a blue glow enveloped the area. Unfazed by this, I closed my eyes and channeled all my mana into the mask. KHH. Within seconds, almost a quarter of my mana was completely gone. Even then, I continued to persevere. Finally, just when I thought that the mask would consume more than half of my mana, the mask finally stopped glowing. Phew. Slumping back, I exhaled. Taking out a mana recovering potion from my dimensional space, I quickly chugged it. Gulp. Gulp. Chugging the 2 potions and feeling my mana replenishing, rummaging through the pockets of the guard, I took his dimensional space. Injecting my mana in it and looking through his items, I slowly stood up. Snap. Staring at Mark's body on the ground beside me, flicking my fingers, flames rose in the air. Within seconds, only the ashes of his body remained. Swoosh. Extending my hand, a small gust of wind blew, and the ashes scattered around the corridor. It's time. Walking in the opposite direction of the training ground, I slowly placed the mask on my face. The moment the mask touched my face, I felt a strange wiggling sensation on my face. This continued for the next 2 seconds before it stopped. Halting my steps and closing my eyes, I softly muttered, "Monarch's indifference. What's going on? What's taking them so long?" Gazing at the training ground from a private room, Joseph was starting to get impatient. Today was supposed to be another training session, but with 876 not present, they couldn't start. What is that incompetent bastard doing? Joseph did not for once think that 876 was at fault for being late. He was confident in the fact that he had completely brainwashed 876. The fault in this case without a doubt lied in the guard escorting him. Just what in the W? To talk. In the midst of his anger, cutting Joseph off, someone knocked on the door of the observation room. Turning around, Joseph asked, "Who is it?" A muffled voice responded, "Reporting. I'm the guard in charge of subject 876. It's you." Upon hearing the identity of the person behind the door, Joseph pressed on a red button next to him, and the door that led to the room unlocked. Buzz, the moment the door opened, Joseph was able to see the outline of the guard. With his head hung low, the guard did not say anything. Unbothered by this, Joseph impatiently asked, "What took you so long? And where is 876? With his head still lowered, the guard did not respond. Frowning, Joseph raised his voice. "Did you not hear me? I'm talking to you. What are you doing here?" "I'm here for," muttered the guard in an almost inaudible voice. "What did you say?" Suddenly, the guard raised his head. Upon raising his head, the guard coldly muttered, "I'm here for you." Chapter 262, Escape 2. "Here for me?" Joseph questioned. "What do you want from me?" Clank. Without answering, Rin, who was disguised as Mark, closed the door behind him. "What are you doing?" Finally noticing that something was amiss, Joseph took a step back. With his hands behind his back, Joseph tried to take out his communication device. Flipping the communication open, he warned, "I don't know what's going on, but I suggest you get out right now." Joseph's action did not go unnoticed by Rin, whose legs' muscles tensed. Bam! Releasing the tension, he quickly appeared before Joseph, startling him. Hayek. With a black box in his hands, Joseph tried to dial a number, but before he could get to it, Rin had already appeared before him. Hyuk, what are you doing? Grabbing onto Joseph's forearm, Rin clenched his hand. Joseph instantly lost all strength in his hand and the small box fell to the ground. His face paled dramatically. "I don't know why you're doing this, but I'm warning you to STO, Hyuk. Shut up." Thud. Rin increased his grip. Instantly, Joseph fell one knee to the ground. Glaring at Rin, Joseph raised his voice and threatened. "What do you want from me? You know if anything happens to me, death would be the easy way out." "What I want from you?" Looking around the room, Rin lowered his head and coldly looked at Joseph. "I want 2 things." "What 2 wait, this voice?" Joseph abruptly stopped talking. Lifting his head up, his mouth stammered. This voice, is that you 876? Having spent over 2 months with 876, how could Joseph not recognize his voice? The color of Joseph's face bleached completely. His eyes trembled uncontrollably. "It can't be? No, I must be imagining things." Without saying anything, Rin coldly placed his hand on Joseph's throat. Hyuk! Placing his other hand on his face, a blue glow enveloped the room. The moment the glow dimmed down, Joseph's eyes opened widely. The monstrous scar-riddled face, Joseph would never forget such a face. It was 876. 876. Like a goldfish, Joseph's mouth opened and closed repeatedly. 8 months, how is this possible? You were faking it for so long? Rin silently nodded. How? It shouldn't be possible, Joseph muttered out loud, no longer caring about the hand that was gripping his throat. I'm sure that the serum works. How coo. Shut up. Cutting Joseph off, Rin tightened the grip of Joseph's throat. High. Crack-a. The sound of bones breaking resounded, and Joseph crumpled to the ground, with a look of indignation and terror on his face. Before he died, he managed to mutter one last word. How? Silently staring at Joseph's lifeless body on the ground, Rin bent down. Bending down, Rin rummaged through his pockets. From his dimensional space to the black box on the ground, Rin took everything. Most importantly, he also took a small black card that hung on Joseph's neck. It was a free access pass that allowed access to most of the facilities available on the floor they were in. Ren's current goal was to disable all of the security cameras and communication devices. He had already planned this beforehand. By disrupting the cameras and communications, he would be able to buy himself enough time to escape. On another note, that was also the place that Ren could use to disable the tracking device installed in his head. Albeit temporarily. After taking everything that was on Joseph's body, Ren placed the mask on Joseph's face. A blue glow enveloped the room, and Ren's mana depleted rapidly. Gulp. Chugging a potion down, Ren placed the mask on his face. The moment the mask touched Ren's face, his face distorted continuously. Before long, his facial structure changed and wrinkles appeared on his face. He looked exactly like Joseph. Taking Joseph's clothes off, Ren replaced his clothes with his. Once he was done changing, Ren exited the room. On his way out of the room, Ren didn't forget to lock the room. Click. Asterisk. Having spent 8 months in the facility, Ren more or less knew the ins and outs of the facility he was in. He knew where the lab, canteen, and surveillance room were. Turning right of a corridor, Ren, who was now disguised as Joseph, met a guard. The guard nodded his head and greeted Ren. Morning, Professor. MHM. Walking past the guard, Ren nodded back and turned left. Stopping right before a thick metallic door, Ren looked towards the side of the door where the words "Surveillance Room" were engraved. Ding! Taking out the card that he took from Joseph, Ren swiped it on a small rectangular box on the right. Within seconds a green light flashed and the doors to the surveillance room opened. Before opening the door, Ren tensed every muscle of his body. He was preparing himself for anything. Clank! The moment the doors opened, Ren saw a large monitor at the very end of the room. On it were over 100 rectangles displaying different areas of the facility. Below them were 3 individuals staring intently at the screens. Besides them were 2 guards. Who are you? Taking a step forward, Ren hoarsely said. It's me. Squinting his eyes, the guard was instantly able to recognize Joseph.
Ah.
It's Professor Joseph. Putting on a friendly smile and relaxing, he asked. What brings you here, Professor? I'm just here to check the surveillance cameras. Check the surveillance cameras? How come? I can't seem to find some of my files. I have a feeling that someone stole it. Stole it? A surprised look appeared on the guard's face. Ren nodded his head. MHM. That's why I would like to check something, or at least, I want to make sure no one stole anything. No problem. The guard nodded his head and looked towards the other guard. Giving a silent nod, the other guard walked up to Ren. Before that, Professor, as per procedures, we need to do a retina and fingerprint check. Check?
Yeah.
It's always been like this. We just need to record whoever comes into the room. Taking out a small rectangular silver box, the guard walked up to Ren. With a friendly smile, the guard turned on the machine. By the way, Professor. Are you sick or something? Your voice sounds a little, hyuk. Cracka. In a lightning-fast manner, Renz placed both of his hands on the guard's head and twisted. Slumping on the ground, the guard died instantly. Hayek.
Ah.
Terrified screams rang throughout the room. Ignoring the screams and taking advantage of the chaos, Ren quickly turned his attention towards the other guard. You. The guard was unable to react in time, and as he fumbled to draw his weapon, Ren had already appeared before him. Extending his elbow, Ren aimed for his head. Unfortunately, raising his arm, the guard moved right and blocked the attack. Ren's surprise attack had failed, but Ren remained cool-headed. With the chip in his head running at full throttle, Ren was able to envision and calculate the most probably counterattack measure that the guard would use to fight back. A right kick towards the head. Reading the guard's body language, Ren bent down. A swooshing sound passed by his head. Taking a step forward, Ren extended his hand. In a lightning-fast manner, his hand hit the guard right in the throat. Quack! The moment Ren's hand hit the guard's throat, a hoarse sound escaped from the guard's mouth as he fell on the ground. With both hands on his throat, the guard opened his eyes widely. Why Yuri not the profess, hyuk? No.
Shh.
Asterisk T. Cracka. Placing both hands on the guard's head, Ren twisted his neck. 2 down. Turning his attention towards the 3 remaining individuals, Ren did not waste a single second. Tensing his legs, before they knew it, Ren had already appeared before them. Don't get near me. Hike. Taking out a dagger from his dimensional space, Ren slit the throat of 2 of the 3 individuals, leaving behind the last one, who was leaning back in absolute terror. Stay away. With his hand underneath the table, the last individual tried to press the emergency button. This did not go unnoticed by Ren, who quickly shot his way. Unfortunately, Ren couldn't make it in time. Wee-yee. Wee-yee. Before Ren could get to him, the last individual pressed on a button that was underneath the table. Instantly the whole facility turned red as the sirens rang throughout the whole facility. Spurt. Unfazed, Ren quickly killed the last individual. Taking out the mask of Dolos, he placed it on top of one of the guards he had killed. A blue glow enveloped the room. After the glow died down, changing his clothes to that of the guard, he moved towards the monitors and sat down. Ta. A long string of text appeared before Ren's eyes as the repetitive sound of a key being pressed rang out of the room. Every second that passed, one of the camera views displayed on the large monitor turned black. Ta. In a minute, more than half of the cameras were shut off. Had it been before, Ren would have never been able to shut down that many cameras at this speed. However, the current Ren was different. With the chip on his head quickly processing most of the data for Ren, he quickly navigated through the system and shut down all communications lines and cameras. He also managed to temporarily disrupt the connection of the tracking device installed in his head. Pressing one final key, the large monitor before Ren turned completely black. At the exact moment he pressed that key, 2 guards entered the surveillance room. Both of them had a weapon in their hands. Stop right there. Unfortunately for them, Ren was quick to react. Disappearing from his spot, he arrived before one of the guards. Ducking down and avoiding the attack of one of the guards, Rin moved behind the two guards. Twisting the dagger in his hand, he swung and aimed at one of the guards' heads. Simultaneously, using his free hand, he hooked his arm around the neck of the other guard. Spurt. Blood spilled. Hyuk. Letting go of the dagger, Rin tightened his choke, and within seconds the other guard's eyes turned white. His breathing stopped. Thud.
Ha. Ha.
Breathing heavily, Ren's eyes paused on a small silver object resting on one of the guard's belt. It was a radio transmitter. Bending down, Ren took it and turned it on. Reporting. After a couple of seconds, a voice replied back. What's the situation? Moving out of the room and putting on the mask, Ren spoke. Reporting. Target seems to have already left the surveillance room. Surveillance has been breached. Multiple fatalities. Have you managed to get a glimpse of how the target looks? Affirmative. Said target seems to be very adept in combat and has a face riddled with scars. Scars? How do you know? Affirmative. My colleague and I were able to spot him. We're currently chasing him. I understand. I will quickly replay the situation to the other guards. They will soon come to your aid. Be on alert. Understood. Crunch. Turning off the radio transmitter, Rin tightened the grip of his hand and directly crushed the device. Tap. 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 Running around the corridor, Rin soon heard the sound of rushed footsteps headed towards his way. Looking around and spotting a small room, using Joseph's card, Rin unlocked the room and quickly got into the room. The moment he entered the room, the guards quickly appeared on the corridor he was in. Over here. According to reports, we're close. Leaning back on the door of the room, Rin could hear the muffled voices of the guards. Within seconds, the guards quickly passed the area he was in. Click. Carefully opening the door and taking out a small spherical object from his dimensional space, Rin bent down slightly and lightly rolled it towards the group of guards in the distance. The device in his hand was a small bomb that he had gotten from the dimensional space of one of the guards. The moment he threw the spherical object, instead of moving backward, Rin moved forward. Almost as though he wanted to be blown up alongside the guards. Hey! He shouted. The moment Rin shouted, all of the guards stopped moving and turned around. Who are you? Boom! Before they knew it, an explosion rang. Chapter 263, Escape, 3. Yei. Yei. The color red flashed throughout the whole facility. Moving in a small unit of 5, a group of guards ran throughout the corridors of the facility. From what reports have said, their target was someone whose face was riddled with scars. Captain, where do you think the suspect has run off to? Fiddling with the radio transmitter in his hand, one of the 5 individuals looked towards the front where a tall man wearing a black uniform stood. With long black hair and sharp brows, the man was the leader of the group. I'm not too sure myself. All we know is that the target seems to be someone that has scars on his face. Do you think he has already escaped? Impossible. The moment the alarms rang, the whole facility shut down. The exit was also blocked by multiple guards. If the said target had already escaped, they would have known by now. Then where do you? Boom! All of a sudden, cutting the guard off, a massive explosion reverberated throughout the whole facility, startling everyone. What the? What's going on? The moment the explosion rang, the whole facility shook. Quick! Let's go! Looking at his squad members, the captain's face turned solemn. Motioning with his hands, he rushed towards the direction where the explosion came from. Following from behind, the squad members took out their weapons. Moving through the corridors of the facility, it didn't take long for them to get near the area where the explosion originated from.
Ugh.
Help! GHHH. Turning right into another corridor, they could faintly hear the sound of pained groans coming from the distance. Quick! Let's go! Exchanging glances with one another, the guards sped up. Soon, turning left of another corridor, they arrived at the scene. The moment they turned the corridor and looked at the after effects of the explosion, the guards couldn't help but frown slightly. With smoke filling the air, over 5 similarly dressed guards laid on the floor passed out. Limbs and blood were splattered all over the ground, depicting a gruesome scene. Staring at the injured guards on the floors, one of the guards pointed towards the right side of their clothes where a large number 15 was imprinted. Captain, it looks to be the 15th unit. There were many patrol units in the monolith. There were a total of 30 units, and each unit consisted of 5 individuals, each led by one captain. Currently, the guards that had just arrived were from the 2nd unit. What do you suggest we do? Staring at the injured guards from the 15th unit, the captain promptly replied. Help the injured. Boo. I know, but we've got to approach this more carefully. The captain paused. If there's any one of them that can still talk amongst the injured, question them and ask them how the suspect looks like and her approximate strength, basically anything that can help. Not much was known about their enemy. Apart from how she looked like, they knew nothing about the said target. Carelessly going after the target might prove to be extremely dangerous. Especially since the target seems to be very resourceful. Roger. Under the captain's orders, the unit members quickly rushed to help the injured 15th unit members. Hey, can you hear me? Are you okay? Bending down and taking out a small potion, one of the guards from the 2nd unit opened the mouth of an injured guard and directly poured it into his mouth. Drink up. Out of all of the ones injured, the one he was tending seemed to be in better condition than the others. Although he too was injured, his injuries only seemed to affect the lower part of his body. KHHH. Moments after feeding the injured guard with a potion, the guard slowly opened his eyes. A small groan escaped from his lips. What's going on? You've regained consciousness. Noticing that the potion had worked, the guard's eyes lit up. Please be careful and don't move. Your body is still injured. Who are you? Looking around, the guard blinked a couple of times. Seemingly confused about the current situation. Let me introduce myself, my name is Balzar, and I'm part of the 2nd Patrol Unit. Lifting his head and looking at his colleagues that were helping the other guards who were in a much worse state, Balzar asked, Can you tell me what happened? 2nd Unit, I see. Understood. Taking a minute to finally realize what was going on, the injured guard nodded his head softly. Why you are in the state that you are in? Cough, cough, I don't really remember much. The guard hoarsely said as he coughed a couple of times. All I remember was me patrolling alongside my unit when suddenly someone called out for me and a bomb suddenly exploded. Caught off guard, we were unable to defend ourselves and found ourselves in this situation. I see. The guard placed his hand on his chin. Were you able to see the features of the individual who did this to you? Just barely. From the brief moment I saw him, I could see that the person responsible for this was a male. Male? Anything else? His face was also filled with scars. Scars? Raising his brows, and putting his hands on his chin, Balzar nodded his head. Yes, that does coincide with the reports. Turning his attention back towards the injured guard, Balzar asked. Do you know where the target ran off to? Yes, over there. Weakly moving his head, the injured guard looked behind him. Staring in the direction of where the guard was looking, Balzar lowered his head. I understand, is there anything else? I'm sorry. The guard shook his head and apologized. Don't be, this is good enough for now. Standing up, Balzar looked at the injured guard before saying, I'm going to talk to my captain, I'll be back shortly. Please wait patiently. Understood. Turning around, Balzar headed towards his captain. Behind him, Balzar was able to see his fellow unit members having a harder time getting information from the injured guards. They were all in critical condition. Arriving before his captain, Balzar raised his voice. Captain. I've got a report. Go ahead. Understood. According to. Nodding his head, Balzar relayed to his captain everything that he had managed to learn from the injured guard. From how they found themselves in such a situation, to the suspect's gender as well as appearance. Standing still, the captain silently listens to the report. Once Balzar finished speaking, the captain scratched the side of his forehead. I see, good job. Placing his hand on his chin, the captain's brows knit together. From what you're telling me, we can infer that the target seems to have access to explosives. Other than that, we still don't know the target's true combat abilities. But, the fact that the target is using explosives to deal with the unit members, is enough to indicate to me the target's approximate strength. Although they were unaware of the target's true combat abilities, from how he resorted to using explosives rather than dealing with the guards directly and silently, the captain was able to infer that said target's strength could not be any higher than C. The 15th unit captain was only D ranked himself. If the target was B ranked, they would have been able to deal with them without causing such a commotion. The fact that the target was unable to do that and had to directly use explosives, which pretty much gave his location away, was enough to convince him about his conjunction. Thus, turning his attention back towards his unit members, he commanded. Balzar, Remy, you two bring the injured to the infirmary. Ivan, Roman, and I will go chase the suspect. Understood. Exchanging glances, the unit members unanimously shouted. Good. Ivan, Roman, follow me. Having issued the orders, the captain quickly dashed towards the direction Balzar had told him the target had ran off to. Asterisk. Hup. A couple of minutes after the captain left, lifting two bodies and putting them on two separate wheeled stretchers, Balzar and Remy, the two remaining members of the second unit, quickly carried the bodies and headed towards the infirmary upstairs. Moving forward, Remy, a fairly skinny individual with short brown hair and green eyes, turned around. A trace of pity flashed his eyes. A pity. Out of the 5 guards, only 2 people remained alive. The captain, and another guard. The rest were, unfortunately, unable to make it. Despite having come rather early, the extent of their injuries was too serious and thus they died within minutes of their captain leaving for the target. Yei. Running around the corridors of the facility, Balzar and Remy quickly arrived before a narrow corridor. Opposite to them was a large metallic door that was guarded by 3 guards. An intangible pressure oozed off of them. State your purpose. Halting his footsteps, Balzar took out a token from his dimensional space and flashed it before the guards. Reporting. I'm Balzar, a member of the second unit. I'm under the captain's orders to bring these 2 injured people to the infirmary upstairs. Looking at the 2 injured people in the stretcher, one of the guards asked. Who are they? Pointing towards the clothes of the 2 individuals in the stretcher, Balzar explained. This here is the captain of the 15th unit, and over here is his unit member. Both of them are heavily wounded. Exchanging glances with each other and confirming that the 2 injured guards were indeed from the 15th unit, the guards stepped to the side. You may pass. Thank you. Nodding his head, Balzar, alongside Remy, moved the stretchers forward and opened the metallic door. The moment they entered the door, they were able to see an elevator in the distance. Quick, we don't have much time. Rushing towards the elevators at full speed, Balzar and Remy quickly pressed on the key and called for the elevator. Ding! Moments after pressing the key, a chime rang, and the doors to the elevator opened up. Quickly entering the elevator, Balzar didn't waste any time and pressed the one button. Clank! The moment Balzar pressed on the key, the doors of the elevator closed. Shortly after, a pushing sensation appeared underneath their feet and the elevator moved up. Hoo! Staring at the corner of the elevator that displayed which floor they were on as it moved up, Remy exhaled. Turning his head to the right and looking at Balzar, he asked. Hey, Balzar, what do you think is happening? Looking at Remy, Balzar scratched the side of his neck. Honestly, I'm just as clueless as you. From what I've heard, it seems like one of the experiments that Professor Joseph was working on went rogue or something like that. Rogue? Really? Wasn't he bragging to the higher-ups? Whilst Balzar and Remy were talking, unbeknownst to them, one of the injured guards opened his eyes. Taking something out from thin air, he quickly placed it in his mouth. After a couple of seconds, the injuries in his lower half of the body quickly healed up. You know what's worse? I heard that, KH. Crack-a. Cutting Remy off, was the sound of bones breaking. Before Remy knew it, he was no longer staring at front of the elevator, but at the back. After that, his vision was enveloped by darkness. What the? Startled, Balzar looked up and saw two emotionless eyes staring back at him. Before he even had enough time to react, a dagger pierced him on the throat. Blood spilled on the ground. Thud. Coldly looking at the corpses on the ground, Rin, who was disguised as a guard, did not waste any time. Channeling flame scions at the tips of his fingers, the corpses of the guards were quickly engulfed in flames. All of this happened within a minute. Ding! Before long, the elevator stopped and the doors opened. Fixing his clothes, Rin took a step out of the elevator.